You are listening to Perplexity.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Perplexity, a mystery podcast. As always, I am your host, Kadra. If you're new to the show, hello and welcome. I tell tales every single week that have perplexed me. So if you love a good mystery that leaves you wanting more, don't worry, you're in the right place. And if you end up enjoying today's episode, I would love it if you continue to follow along. If you're a returning listener, hello, my friends, and welcome back. So happy you're here. I have a wild story for you guys today. Today, I am unlocking the Patreon vault once again while I take a little break. I'm going out of town this weekend, and this week has just been absolutely crazy. I'm quite exhausted, just to be completely honest with you guys. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice there is no video today, but rest assured, we'll be back to making videos very soon. I have plenty of other topics that I've researched that'll be coming out underway quickly, but today we're doing a Patreon leak, and I'm excited about this. I recorded it over a year ago. Every other month on Patreon, I do documentary coverage, so this was my coverage of the Netflix documentary, really a docuseries, American Nightmare. It's 3 episodes, but I covered it all in one episode on Patreon. So if you guys end up enjoying this, if y'all like documentary coverage, I would highly recommend checking out the Patreon. And just want to remind everybody really quickly, if you have not done so yet, it would mean the world to me, and it really helps the show if you are leaving 5-star reviews on Apple, Spotify, wherever you're getting your podcasts. Tell a couple of people you know about the show if you think they will like it. And if you're watching on YouTube, I would love if you hit the subscribe button. Trigger warning for today's episode, this podcast is not for children. Listener discretion is advised. And all the sources that I used for today's episode will be down in the show notes. So without further ado, let's get into today's Patreon leak, my documentary coverage of American Nightmare. The documentary opens with 30-year-old Erin Quinn from Mare Island in Vallejo, California, calling 911. And this all takes place in 2015. So he calls 911 on March 23rd at 1:53 p.m. And his conversation with the dispatcher is basically like, my girlfriend got kidnapped last night. Someone came to our house. They tied us up. They took her. The dispatcher's like, what do you mean she got kidnapped? Why didn't you call last night? Blah, blah, blah. He's like, I was tied up. And so then the dispatcher is like, what time did you get untied? And so he's like, okay, this morning they gave me sedatives. And then he tells the dispatcher his name and his girlfriend's name. You can tell by the 911 dispatcher's tone and the way that she words the questions, just straight off the bat, she is immediately suspicious of Erin. Erin, I will say, does sound like calm and collected over the phone, but people process things in different ways. The girlfriend's full name is Denise Huskins. Denise was 29 years old at the time she was kidnapped. She had her doctorate in physical therapy. She and Erin were a new couple. They had been dating for just a few months. Denise was quickly labeled in the media as an all-American girl. She was like this really pretty, blonde. This would be like just blown up in the media. Vallejo, where she was kidnapped from, was also a really nice area with really low crime. So this all just seemed very unbelievable. He calls 911 at like 1:53. By 3 p.m., Erin Quinn is taken into the Vallejo police station for questioning. They also did DNA samples. Denise has been missing for like 10 hours based on Erin's timeline. The officer interviewing Erin introduces himself as Matt Mustard, and this immediately made me think of Colonel Mustard in Clue. Just a ridiculous name. Mustard explains to Erin that he is being treated as a victim in this. He's not being detained. And Erin's whole thought process was, let me tell them everything that I remember. I want them to find her. I want to help. So he goes piece by piece into what he remembers. So this is what Erin tells police. He was with his girlfriend, Denise, the prior night, March 22nd. They were hanging out at his house, just relaxing. They had had a couple of beers and cocktails. Then later that night, they went to bed, and they were suddenly woken up to flashing bright white lights in their faces, like blinding them. There were also laser dots crossing their bodies, like from a gun. There were unidentified men in the room. Aaron also remembered hearing a taser go off at one point. And the man also, this is really creepy, called Aaron by name, telling him to lay face down on the bed. The men also would tell Denise to tie Aaron's hands behind his back. So she complied. She restrains Aaron's hands with zip ties. Both of them had swim goggles put over their eyes that were like blacked out so they couldn't see anything. Headphones were placed over his ears. Through the headphones, there was some type of wind chime sound and a voice giving him instructions, explaining that the men were going to take their vitals. He then felt a blood pressure cuff around his arm and the squeeze of the cuff. And then they forced Aaron to take some type of sedative, which he later said was a mix of NyQuil and diazepam. So it's just already so weird and crazy, right? Like, I don't know about you, but I've never heard of a kidnapping or a robbery like this before. The headphones part is really weird to me. The vitals too, like, why do you need my vitals? What is this for? And then also, like, how does Aaron know what he gave him? Did he tell him that it was NyQuil and diazepam? It's just very, very strange. Aaron also remembered being cold at one point and asking the men for a blanket. One of the men apologized and said, "Oh, I'm sorry how cold it is in here. I forgot. We're all wearing wetsuits." Aaron is telling all of this to police, and they're like, "What? They're wearing wetsuits?" But I also was like, I mean, it's possible, because that would be a good way to like prevent their DNA or like their hair from being found at the crime scene. So according to Aaron, it was at this point that Denise and Aaron were then taken to separate rooms in his house. A man then told Aaron that they had a problem because basically the kidnappers messed up. This whole thing was meant to be a hit on Andrea. And Andrea is Aaron's ex-fiance. He had broken up with Andrea literally just a few months ago. He had found out that she was cheating on him. They broke things off, and they said that they were going to take Denise for this kidnapping anyway. Like, it was supposed to be Andrea getting kidnapped, but because they were already like so far deep, they're like, okay, we're going to take Denise instead because we could still get some money out of this. And they are telling Aaron that they want to get $15,000 out of him, and they'll like give him instructions to send them money. They also told him that they were going to be installing a camera in the house so they would know if Aaron went outside, if he called the police. They said that if he didn't comply, they would hurt Denise. The men would then leave in Aaron's car with Denise in the trunk, and Aaron lost consciousness. He would then wake up the next day about 11:30 a.m. He's drowsy and confused. He's in, I believe it's his room, and he sees this red, like, duct tape all around him, basically marking the area that he needs to remain in. Then there's this camera mounted on the ceiling in the corner of his room. He then gets an email from the kidnappers asking for the $15,000 ransom in cash. Aaron calls his bank. They tell him that the best they can do is give him an advance of $3,500. He emails the kidnappers back and he's like, "Hey, I can't give you the 15 all at once. This is the best I can do." But then 20 minutes goes by and he's not hearing any response from the kidnappers. So he's panicking. Eventually, he decides to call the Vallejo Police Department. So this is when we get to the 1:53 p.m. phone call. Aaron has been taken down to the station. He's telling all of this to Colonel Mustard or whatever the hell and another detective. They do not believe him, which I don't necessarily blame them for, but what was so hard to watch is what they say to Aaron in the interview. Colonel Mustard, particularly, he accuses Aaron of being a monster, that he dumped her body and must have let her rot. And then they say that, oh, maybe she overdosed and you panicked, and maybe you accidentally called Andrea's name out during sex, and then y'all got in an argument and you just snapped. Just knowing this story of what actually happened, it just makes this so incredibly hard to watch. It's so manipulative. It's so messed up. That, they had told him that he was a victim in this, and they were going to treat him as a victim, and they just wanted to hear what happened. And then they just completely flip this on him after he's been cooperative. And I understand police lying and manipulating to get answers and find her quickly, but just the way that they handle this investigation afterwards, you'll see this is just one problematic behavior in a giant pile of what Vallejo PD did. Aaron would also submit to taking a polygraph with the FBI. The FBI's been involved at this point. And the FBI agent, which his name is, I think, David Sesma. We'll talk about him more later, but he's the one who does the polygraph. And he tells Aaron immediately, he's like, there's no question in my mind that you failed this test. And he calls Aaron a calculated monster. He tells him he's going to lose the respect of his family, that he is going to destroy everything that he worked so hard for. He'll be labeled as a cold, calculated serial killer that strangled the life out of Denise and killed her and callously dumped her body somewhere. Now we're never going to find it. And Aaron, meanwhile, is proclaiming his innocence. He's like, I did not do this. I know it looks bad, but I just want you to find Denise. If this is how y'all are going to be, then I guess I need a lawyer. And so he says all of this to David. He's like, I guess I need a lawyer. And so David stops talking to him and gets up and leaves. He does get a lawyer. Meanwhile, Denise is still missing. Her parents, they don't know about this. They live 400 miles away in Huntington Beach, California. Several hours in the afternoon later, Denise's mother, Jane, gets a phone call from the police telling them what happened. Jane and Mike, Denise's parents, didn't really know Aaron that well because, again, they've just started dating. But they knew that Denise had past relationships that had always been with good people. Denise seemed happy with Aaron. But of course, the family can't help but be suspicious. This story is very wild. Random men coming into Aaron's home and taking Denise. Why? Why would they do this? So Aaron's parents would talk to police, and police were basically like, hey, we need y'all to come down to the station. We've got to ask y'all some questions and figure out what's going on here. So they went down. In the documentary, Aaron's parents explained that Aaron works at Flagship Hospital. He's also a physical therapist like Denise. He's a good kid. He's never gotten into any kind of trouble. They had also met Denise one time, and they said she was like really sweet. They seemed good together. But his parents also didn't want Aaron to rush into things because he had just broken things off with his fiance, Andrea. And this is when the viewers all find out that Andrea, Denise, and Aaron all worked at Flagship Hospital. They were also all in the same rehab unit. That's gotta be awkward. Like, you have your ex-fiance and your current girlfriend in the same unit with you. So there would obviously be some conflict. Denise and Andrea didn't get along, and Andrea would also later be interviewed by police, saying that when her and Aaron ended things, it was on really bad terms. But I guess they made up at some point, because then she said, yeah, it was like really bad, but we were amicable after some time. And she also said that he seemed open to the idea of them getting back together. It's also not clear when this occurred, but Andrea claimed that she had to ask Aaron to stop coming into her office because he would try to like hug her and kiss her. And I mean, this is kind of he said, she said. But we do know Denise found text messages between Aaron and Andrea. And Aaron told Andrea that he like still had feelings for her. Denise, of course, felt like Aaron was emotionally cheating in some sense, which I would agree with that. And Aaron claims after she found all of this out, obviously they fought it out, but he told Denise that he would make necessary steps to move forward and that he knew it wasn't right what he had done and that he needed to move on. He hadn't treated Denise the way she deserved to be treated. He was even like, I'm going to go to therapy. I won't talk to Andrea anymore. He's like setting all these boundaries. They were basically going to start over. This is like the little argument they have the night that she gets kidnapped. Meanwhile, the investigation and the search for Denise is still going on. So police would seal off Aaron's home. They searched for evidence. They gathered up a large team, including search dogs and boats. They have dive teams. Aaron is falling apart at this point. He's been interrogated for like 18 hours, and they've put him in these jailhouse clothes. You can see him struggling mentally in the footage from the police station. He's like on the floor crying. He's like, what the fuck is going on? Why aren't they listening to me? When his lawyer would later show up, he said that Aaron was super pale. He had clearly been crying. And the lawyer basically tells police, like, look, Aaron has told you everything he knows. He's been cooperative. He gave you DNA. He gave you fingerprints. So he's going with me if you're not arresting him. The lawyer takes him. He leaves the station. And Aaron tells the same story verbatim multiple times to his lawyer and a defense attorney. His lawyer and his defense attorney found him completely credible. They were like, we know this is an insane story. We believe you, though. The problem is no one in North America is going to believe this wild story. So they knew that the odds were stacked against them. It doesn't look good, but the investigation has to go on. So at 12:24 p.m. the same day, after Denise has been missing for 31 hours, it's a Tuesday afternoon, a reporter from a local paper gets an email, and the subject line is Denise. So this reporter opens up this email, and it has an audio file. It's this woman talking, and she says, "Hi, my name is Denise Huskins. I'm kidnapped. Otherwise, I'm fine." She sounds calm, and the reporter doesn't know what to make of this. So he hands this audio over to Vallejo PD, and they play it for Denise's family, of course. They confirm that this is Denise's voice. This gave the family hope. They're like, oh my gosh, Denise must still be alive. But they're also starting to get frustrated because police seem to be trying to like sniff for dirt now about Denise. They're asking Denise's family about her past, if she had any bad boyfriends. They're talking about like her childhood and stuff. And of course, Denise's parents want to help the police. So Denise's mother tells police that she did have some struggles, some really significant trauma from when she was a child. She was molested when she was 9 years old. And this part broke me and absolutely enraged me. Mr. Mustard, when he hears this, says, well, you know, women who have been molested are known to pretend to have it happen again. That way they can relive the thrill of it. Are you out of your fucking mind? How sick and disconnected do you have to be to say something like that to anyone, especially as a police officer, to her missing daughter? Like, how dare you accuse someone of something like that? FBI agents, top homicide investigators, they're all on the case, but they're like, all they're doing is grilling Aaron. His attorney's present and records everything. The defense attorney was just like, I had a feeling that I should record, so I did. At one point, the investigators ask Aaron, did you ever think maybe Denise is behind this? So then they cut to March 25th, 2015 at 9 a.m. Mike Huskins, Denise's dad, gets a message from his daughter, Denise. She has walked over to his home, and she has been found safe where they live in Huntington Beach. So the family is, of course, relieved, but they're also mystified. And the media is like, what the hell is happening? She's home, she's safe. She appeared unharmed. She had no visible injuries. So police want to talk to Denise right away. It's 9:27 p.m. later that night. Vallejo police have talked to Denise, is my understanding, and then they do this press conference. And they tell the media that Denise is not being cooperative. They say that none of Aaron's claims about what happened have been substantiated. They even say that Aaron and Denise have, quote, plundered valuable resources away from our community. So police have now spun this as being an orchestrated, elaborate hoax. Police are now threatening Aaron and Denise with legal charges. And here's the thing. Again, I understand how unbelievable this is, but if you're going to accuse someone of being a hoaxer, maybe look into literally any other alternative theories. And they absolutely did not in any way, shape, or form. They weren't calling any other districts outside of their jurisdiction. They weren't, looking for similar cases, any kidnappers in the area, like nothing. They just blame it on these people. And 1 year before Denise was kidnapped, the movie Gone Girl had come out and swept the nation. It was a huge movie. For anyone who has not seen Gone Girl, it's a movie about a woman who basically finds out her husband had been cheating on her. So she fakes her own disappearance to set him up for murder. But then she shows up alive. So in an actual news segment about Denise's kidnapping, one reporter said that police are now wondering if Denise Huskins is a real-life Gone Girl, and they're accusing her of faking her own kidnapping for ulterior motives. At the very end of episode 1, they finally sit down Denise. That is like the really big part of episode 2. You get to hear Denise's side of the story. I do want to say here, big trigger warning, content warning for sexual assault. Denise, you'll find, tells an extremely similar story to Aaron. She talks about the men telling her that this is going to be a robbery, but then they kidnapped her. She remembers being put in the trunk of Aaron's car, being drugged. She had those blacked out swim goggles put on her. Her hands were zip tied. She was told by the men, do not speak, do not scream. She's driven to this new location, and then she is put into the trunk of a new car, and she heard the deep rev of an engine, which reminded her of a Mustang. She also felt like they were on the freeway at one point. She's trying to memorize where she's at in any way she can, like the turns that they're making, what she's hearing. But of course, she's been drugged. It's pitch black. She's disoriented. So they end up at this unknown location, and Denise could smell pine trees. It was a quiet and remote area. She was dragged by her feet by a man into a building. She remembered being on a concrete floor, staying there for a while, and then being taken into essentially a cabin. This man moves Denise to a bedroom. There's a bed inside, and he has her sit down. And he explains, this wasn't meant for you. This was meant for Aaron's ex, Andrea. Denise is like, what the hell do you mean? She's so confused. He explains that this is all part of a black market company that kidnaps people for money. And he then says he will release her in 48 hours. And Aaron has been given instructions of what to do. Then Denise lost consciousness for what seemed to have been several hours. And she remembered hearing French pop music playing. She remembered liking the music. She remembered the man showing some kindness. He would take her on routine bathroom breaks, guiding her by the hand. Tells her he's ex-military, he struggles with insomnia and PTSD, but he also tells Denise that now there's another problem. There's no collateral to ensure that Denise doesn't tell police what happened to her. He says that the only way to fix this is for him to have sex with her. And they need to video it so that if she tells police, he can release this video on the internet. So deranged and horrific. The man climbs on top of Denise and he sexually assaulted her. And she talks in the documentary about how she experienced what she's describing as derealization. She had basically an out-of-body experience when he was finished. He took her to the bathroom so that she could remove her goggles. She felt like he was conditioning her. A full day has passed at this point. She wakes up the next morning. She wakes up to this blasting music in the next room. She hears somebody seemingly cleaning up the house, and she's just kind of scanning the room. She sees that all the windows have been barricaded, all the doors are locked, there's nothing she can use as a weapon. So she knows she can't escape. To her, her best bet is just like being as nice as possible to the kidnapper. The man then goes into her room again and says that they've lost contact with Aaron, which I'm sure was when he was being interrogated. Denise fears that Aaron has been killed. He sedates her again and explains that his associates are on the way and it's best to not engage with them because they're not as nice. So she hears these men talking outside for a while and then they leave. Her kidnapper comes back and explains that she needs to record herself for the media and the police to show proof of life. So she is instructed to tell them in the recording her name and give a current event so they know that this is a recent recording. She talked about how earlier that day there was a plane crash in the Alps. She talks about a Blink-182 concert. Denise explains while she was recording this, she barely felt like she was conscious. She had been given tons of sedatives. So like to us, we hear the recording and she sounds super calm, but to her, really, she was just like fighting to stay awake, which would explain why her voice kind of sounded, flat. She was then instructed to have sex with the kidnapper again, and this time it needs to look consensual, like they're in a relationship and having an affair. This guy is so sick. She realizes at this point that it has to look consensual, so she can't be detached. She can't separate from this anymore. She was given booze and wine, and then he was sexually assaulting her again. So it's just so awful. I can't imagine going through something like this. This is like every woman's worst nightmare. She basically lost consciousness again, and then she woke up later in the middle of the night to a knock on the door, and it's the man again. He wants to show her something. He played her a recording of her father talking to a news outlet, saying he wanted her to fight and come home. And she said it was at this point she knew she had to get things together. She had to figure out how to get out of here. While the man is playing her this video, he puts his hand on her back and he's like, "It must feel real now." Denise is breaking down and sobbing, and it's this guy is so delusional. So eventually the man tells Denise that it is time for her to go back home. He gives her more sedatives and puts her in the Mustang, and he drives her to Huntington Beach. She remembers getting out of the car and she can see this white exterior of the vehicle. He also tells her that because Aaron went to the police, she needs to talk to the police, but she cannot tell them under any circumstances two things. She can't tell the police that her kidnapper was in the military, and she can't tell the police that they had sex. Then he's like, "I'll be watching you. So if we find out what you say, it's not just you that you need to worry about, but your family." So he threatens her, and then he tells her to count to 10, and the car drives off. So once she's counted to 10, she takes the tape off of her eyes, and she realizes that she is on the street of her hometown. So she walks to her dad's house, calls him, and her dad isn't home. But a neighbor recognizes Denise and is like, "Oh my God, are you okay? How can I help?" So she waits at her neighbor's apartment until police get there. Denise would later say she noticed that when the officers got there, they had a recording device on them. There were helicopters. Reporters were showing up. She asks if she has to talk to police right now because she's really scared. She was just threatened. Her family was threatened. She's been sexually assaulted. But she does tell them about the kidnapping and most of what she remembers. She leaves out the things that she was instructed by her kidnapper and her abuser to leave out. She tells them that she does have fear of what would happen if she talks too much. And the police explain to her that she's being offered immunity. This woman has just been through hell. She's being re-traumatized, telling them all of this. And this is their response. And she's like, immunity from what? Like, what is going on? She doesn't know that Aaron has been interrogated for the last 18 hours and that they're trying to blame them. She hasn't seen the news that's accusing her of being a hoaxer, but she realizes she needs to get a lawyer. So she does, and the lawyer would recommend that Denise didn't make any further statements and that she just needs to leave the police station. So she listens to her lawyer, as she should. Meanwhile, as we know, the police would do this conference, and then Denise starts to see in the news that she's being accused of being a hoaxer. Aaron is like the one person, of course, who would understand what Denise is going through. He really wants to talk to Denise. He finds out she's alive, she's home. He's like, I need to talk to her. I need to make sure she's okay. Denise would later tell everything she remembered, including the sexual assault and the military background, to her lawyer. And she explains she had these severe threats made against her and her family. They're like, okay, I need you to tell me the same story again. Okay, I need you to tell me again. Okay, I need you to tell me again. So she tells the same story, point by point, 3 or 4 times, and they believe her. And the lawyer is also like, okay, you need to get a sexual assault exam as soon as possible. So the lawyer calls Vallejo PD on Denise's behalf. And he's like, hey, we need to get an essay exam right now. But police are like, no, she needs to give us a statement first. Then we can do the sexual assault exam. Sorry. I feel like she can talk to you whenever she wants, considering the fact that this is to police, a possible rape victim. Let's take care of the essay exam first. Let's listen to what the victim wants to do. How about that? And Denise knows how backwards and demeaning this is, but once again, she has no choice but to trust the system like Aaron did. So she agrees. She tells police, including Detective Mustard and the FBI, everything. Denise has seen the press conference. She's on guard, but she also is going to fight and tell them the truth. So she answers all their questions. She talks about her and Aaron's relationship. She tells them every detail of the home invasion and describes her captor. She said he was like tall, lean, maybe 6 feet. She tells them about him being a war vet, about his insomnia and his PTSD history. She tells them about the turns that the car made, how long the drive was. She's going through all of the horrific, traumatizing details of her rape. She's crying, but she's pushing through. And the police, according to Denise, seemed to be listening to her and believing her until they started asking her questions like, well, did you fight back? Did you make noise? Did you scream? Well, why not? Why didn't you do that? Have you ever been in that trunk before? Just extremely insensitive, ridiculous questions. It's at some point around this that Aaron would get word of what exactly happened to Denise while she was kidnapped. He finds out, through his defense attorney, that's right, looking at my notes. His defense attorney tells him, and Denise does the sexual assault exam. The nurses noted micro lesions in her cervix, which would indicate sexual intercourse had taken place in the last 1 to 2 days. So this couldn't be from Aaron. The next day, Denise is questioned again. The FBI had not released the recording of this interview, so we don't know exactly what they said to Denise and her lawyer, but Denise and her lawyer would recall that David Sesma, the FBI agent, said that there were a lot of inconsistencies with Denise's story, and they ask if there's anything she wants to change. And he also said, I want you to know, it's a federal crime to lie to a federal agent. And Denise and her lawyer are just in absolute disbelief. Her lawyer knows that her story is exactly the same as the 3-4 times she told it to them. There's no discrepancies whatsoever in her story. And also there's literal physical evidence that she was assaulted. The nurses found it. So the lawyer is like, her story is completely accurate to what she told you before. Like, what are you talking about? It's like they're trying to get her to change a detail to trip her up and like pin it on her. So the lawyer like pulls the agent aside and it's like, what are you talking about? What do you mean discrepancies? And it's at this point, I cannot make this up, that David Sesma looks at this lawyer and says, well, haven't you seen the movie Gone Girl? The lawyer in the documentary is basically like this insane tunnel vision, this confirmation bias that the police had. It's literally ruining Denise and Aaron's lives. It's destroying them and their families. Denise was looking at being sentenced from anywhere from a year to 18 months in federal prison. She would lose her doctorate, too. She wouldn't be able to practice physical therapy. Neither would Aaron. Her whole life is just being ripped out from under her. But Denise would eventually get to see Aaron. She feared that he would see her differently after everything that happened, which is really sad. She also didn't want this to be the reason that Aaron would stay with her. Remember, they've only been dating a few months. But he reassured her that he believed her and that he loved her. He knows what they went through, you know, like he experienced the kidnapping too. So he knows she's telling the truth, but they also know that their lives are still in danger because these people are still out there. And the police certainly were not protecting them. They were not looking for anyone else. Their whole investigation was centered on Aaron and Denise. So the case to police is closed, and the only question was if the couple was going to be charged. But the family is like, what the hell? Like, you need to be looking for this person or for this group. But then the same reporter that got the audio recording of Denise gets another email from the kidnappers. And this time, it is a written confession from an unknown email. It is explaining in detail what they did to Denise. There's pictures of a gun with a flashlight taped to it. There's pictures of the room that Denise was held in. They mention the car that she was taken in, and they say it was a white Mustang convertible. And they even say in the email, you need to believe Denise. So the reporter sends these emails to police, and he never hears back from police. Denise's lawyer finds out about all this too, but again, police just have tunnel vision. And also, my whole thing is like, this reporter gets tons of emails from this kidnapper. There's all these details. What is this? Do they want to get caught? Like, this is one of the dumbest criminals ever. Like, the very basic thing is to not get caught, right? I mean, obviously, you know what I mean? Like, I want them to get caught, but they're saying that it's like a group of 3 friends. 2 of them are college graduates. They're telling them the car that they have. Like, why? And they even say if Denise and Aaron don't get an apology from Vallejo police, that they're going to do it again. They're going to kidnap someone else. So, of course, police are not listening. And 10 weeks after Denise has been kidnapped, on June 5th, 2015, in Dublin, California, there is a break-in at North Terracina Drive. Police get a call, Dublin police, from a woman saying that there's men fighting with her husband in their house. They've broken in. They have taken her 22-year-old daughter hostage. It's at this point that we get into part 3 of 3 of this story. So this is the 3rd episode. So this second kidnapping happens about 40 miles from Vallejo. The woman that calls 911 says that she's hiding in the bathroom. They were in bed when they were awoken to laser lights on them. And when the police got there, they find the husband covered in blood, holding a rag to his face. He says their daughter's safe, but the suspect ran out the back door, and the police would find duct tape, zip ties. The suspect was wearing all black and seemed to escape by hopping the fence, but a dog was able to track the scent to a big field. But when they get to this big open field, they ultimately lost the scent. But this kidnapper, like I said, is an idiot. So they find that he left his cell phone behind on the kitchen counter. So Dublin police were able to track the phone to a man named Matthew Muller. And Muller is a former Marine. He studied at Harvard Law. and he has priors. He has been a suspect for several sexual battery charges and attempted rape cases. The way that police find out that this is Matthew Muller's phone is they find, I think, like his mom's number in there, and they call her. Police are super casual to the mom, and they're like, oh yeah, we just found his phone and we just want to get it back to him. Do you know where he is? And so she's like, oh yeah, he is staying at my cabin in South Lake Tahoe, which sounds eerily similar to the location that Denise would describe having been taken to. You know, it was remote, it smelled like pine. So police go there. They get a search warrant to search the cabin. They barge in through the front door, and they would find the house trashed. There's like random junk everywhere, but they would also find a lot of evidence. So they find zip ties, duct tape. There's also toy guns that are painted to look like real guns. One had a laser attached to it. And they also find Matthew Muller. So this piece of shit gets arrested, and he's quiet, he's composed, he shows no emotion. He, according to police, looked like an average all-American male. He's a white adult with dark hair. He is tall and lean, just like how Denise described her captor. Police would also find all the windows in the cabin were covered. Just like Denise had told police, there's NyQuil bottles, there's a syringe, and they also find his stolen white Mustang convertible. So there's a GPS inside the car, and there's all these different addresses. So Dublin police are like, okay, we can look at these, see where else he's been. And then, really strange, they also find a blow-up doll dressed in black in the trunk, made to look like another person. There's a nylon belt with a pair of blacked out goggles. And on these goggles, there is a single strand of blonde hair. So police collect this hair sample. And Denise and Aaron this whole time have been staying with family. They're getting abusive and harassing messages on Facebook, which is so disgusting. They're getting death threats from people. Their attorneys are continuing to work tirelessly on their cases to try to get police to listen to them and look for these kidnappers. But police just continued to look at them as suspects. So this is when Aaron finds out that the lead FBI agent, David Sesma, the one who called him a liar, used to date Andrea, Aaron's ex-fiance. So this is a clear conflict of interest. He should not be working on this case. So the lawyer reaches out to the inspector general, and they're like, he needs to be off the case. This is extremely problematic. But the inspector general would look into the case and say that he found no problem with David Sesma being on the case. It just feels, the way David Sesma was treating Aaron, it just felt very personal, according to Aaron. Meanwhile, Dublin police would continue to investigate the kidnapping or the attempted kidnapping of the 22-year-old. There's this new officer in Dublin. Her name was Misty. She is really looking forward to working on this kidnapping case. She's going to solve it. And she is looking into Matthew Muller's background. She knows he has all these sexual assault priors. So Misty says, I love this. The reason she became a cop in the first place is because one of her best friends was actually sexually assaulted. So she's very passionate about sex crimes. So Misty finds out that one of Matthew Muller's cases came out of Palo Alto, California from 2009. And he was a suspect in the case, but he could never be tied to anything. But the MO of the Palo Alto 2009 case is incredibly similar to this kidnapping case in Dublin. I keep saying kidnapping, attempted kidnapping, but police in Palo Alto talk to Misty, and they say that they've suspected Muller of being the one who committed this crime in 2009, but they just could never prove it. The victim in this crime apparently told Muller that she had been raped before. She was like, please don't do this. I've been raped before. And he didn't want to re-victimize her, so he let her go. Wow, how kind of you. And again, they couldn't tie him to it, but they strongly suspected him, so the case was left open. So Misty continues to dig. She also notices there's no goggles noted in this case. So she's like, okay, there has to be another victim because these goggles were in his trunk. There's a blonde hair, and she knows it's going to take a while to get DNA off of the hair. She finds another case from 2009, 8 miles from Palo Alto, and it's in a town called Mountain View. And again, the details of this case are eerily similar. The victim is interviewed in the documentary. Her name's Tracy. She said that at the time that this happened, she was in her 30s and she was living alone. Matthew Moeller also called Tracy by name, just like he did to Aaron and Denise. He drugged Tracy and he put the swim goggles on her. He said that he was going to rape her, but she begged him not to, and he decided he couldn't go through with it. So he told her to get a dog so that she would be safer, and he let her go. And Tracy told police what had happened. She reported this crime way back in 2009. And you know what they said? They said, "Are you sure it wasn't just a bad dream?" Police also asked her boyfriend if she was an attention seeker and if she was known to make up stories. The anger, disbelief, and just the amount that I am done with law enforcement like this. How despicable and disgusting are you to treat a victim like this? But Misty is going to figure this out, damn it. So she looks into Tracy, but she finds that Tracy is a brunette. So she knows she's still searching for another victim. So it's at this point that they cut to Denise in the documentary. She's going into detail about her past and how she had been molested when she was a child. Then on a separate occasion, again, when she was 19 at a party. And Denise, too, talks about how she drove to the police station to report it because it happened to her when she was a child. She was too scared. So when it happened the second time, she was like, okay, I'm going to build up the bravery and I'm going to tell police what happened. She drove to the police and reported this crime, but police convinced her that there was no point in her filing because it was a he said, she said. Misty keeps digging and eventually finds that the stolen white Mustang has, they find the original owner. So they contact the owner, and the owner is actually the one who asked Misty if she had ever heard of the Mare Island Creeper and about the assaults in 2014 in Vallejo. So she's like, no, I'm from Dublin. This Mustang owner talks about a man that was in Vallejo and had been peeping into college students' windows. He was terrorizing the female students there night after night, and he would always get away. The students would tell police about this night after night, and police did nothing. So eventually, having no other choice, the students took matters into their own hands. They gathered a big group, and they basically found out that this was Matthew Moeller. They found out he was ex-military, he was a lawyer, and this is when Misty makes the connection. The Mare Island Creeper is Matthew Moeller, and he is responsible for countless sexual assaults and extremely problematic behaviors towards women. The car owner then told Misty about the, quote, Gone Girl case. This is how Misty finds out about what happened to Denise. She finds out Denise was taken from the same area where the Mare Island calls were coming from. Then she sees the pictures of Denise with her long blonde hair. She sees the reporters and the police calling her a liar on national news. And Misty knows that she's telling the truth. She's like, I cannot believe that they're on the news calling this girl a liar, and I am about to bring all of this together. She's like, don't worry, girl, I got you. So she calls Vallejo police to tell them what she knows. And she is calling and calling and calling and calling and calling, and they are not answering. But she was persistent. She called nonstop, and finally they answered her. According to Misty, Vallejo was basically just like, oh yeah, we're not investigating that case anymore. It's been turned over to the FBI. And they were not helpful at all. They find out that the FBI agent David Sesma is like still the main guy over the case, you know, the one who dated Aaron's ex. She calls David Sesma. She tells him what she knows. She tells him about Matthew Mueller. She sends him all the information that she has. He, again, according to Misty, seemed more than disinterested. But finally, because Dublin police had done proper police work and they talked to Vallejo, it's like the wool was slowly being lifted off of Vallejo PD's eyes. Denise's lawyer, along with the media, would get word of this suspect in custody, Matthew Mueller. And so people are like, oh my God, Denise was telling the truth this whole time. Matthew Mueller gets interviewed at one point on the news, and Denise sees this. And she said as soon as she heard his voice, she knew it was him. Denise's lawyer would also eventually get a hold of the affidavit for Aaron and Denise's case. The affidavit made it abundantly clear that this was a botched investigation. They found out that the polygraph, which, by the way, polygraphs, they should not be doing these at all, but they find that Aaron's polygraph was actually inconclusive. He hadn't failed it like David told him. He lied to him. There was also a section about the sexual assault exam in the affidavit. They noted no evidence of non-consensual sex, but not every rape is going to be physically damaging. So it's like they didn't even give that as an option in their affidavit. They were just like, well, there's no signs of trauma, so it had to have been consensual. The document also mentioned how Aaron told them the kidnappers were going to be contacting him on his phone, but police told Aaron to put his phone on airplane mode, and they left it like this until the next evening. And when he went off of airplane mode, police saw that 2 calls had come in. The calls were traceable to within 200 meters of where Denise was being held. Like, are you kidding me? They literally had all the puzzle pieces. Denise says in the documentary, if they had actually monitored Aaron's phone, they literally could have saved Denise from the second rape. And now police are like, okay, we believe you, it's Matthew Mueller, but he acted alone. It's only Matthew. So our work is done. But Aaron and Denise remember hearing multiple voices. Remember the men that showed up to the cabin and were talking to Matthew? They know that this is like a group. Matthew Mueller had said, you know, in the reporter email, it was a group of 3 people. He had also told Denise they did everything wrong. Everything. To this day, we don't know if what Matthew said is true, that this was a black market kidnapping ring. But Matthew was the only one that was ever caught and charged. So after all of this, a press conference would be held where finally, for the first time, the truth would be told by Denise's lawyer, with Denise and Aaron present. They would stand up there silent, but their emotions on the camera spoke volumes. Matthew Mueller would be tried, and Denise was at the trial. She took the stand. She said to her kidnapper, quote, Matthew Mueller, now we meet face to face, eye to eye. I am Denise Huskins, the woman behind the blindfold, end quote. Matthew got 40 years in prison with charges of kidnapping, robbery, and rape. He was not charged with the attempted rapes of the other victims. So again, another injustice that needs to move forward. And also, this very much there's so many things that bother me about this case, so many things. But another big thing, it's never explained why Aaron's ex, Andrea, was the intended target of the kidnapping. So I know there's like theories on this about why, but it's very unsettling. Again, like if he's telling the truth, if this is a kidnapping ring where they kidnap people for money, it's like, what did they want with Andrea? Why her? And allegedly, it seems a little coincidental, the guy who had to be over this case used to date her. There's just way too many weird connections here, in my opinion. In 2016, Denise and Aaron would sue the city of Vallejo for defamation, as they fucking should. a tip would come through as well during this whole process about Andrew Badu, I think is how you say his name. He's the chief of Vallejo PD. So this anonymous source reported that right before that national press conference where they got up there and called Aaron and Denise liars, Badu would tell Officer Park, the guy that talked at the conference, that he wanted him to, quote, burn that bitch, in reference to Denise. Again, just an example of how incredibly biased and blind, depraved these people were that were working on this case. Andrew Badu, of course, denies this claim, but it's like, why would someone make this up? But ultimately, none of the officers involved in Aaron and Denise's cases were disciplined, including Colonel Mustard Asshole. He was actually awarded Officer of the Year in 2015. The year that this happened, this guy gets Officer of the fucking Year. Denise and Aaron do settle out of court for $2.5 million, but it's nothing for what they've been through. And of course, all the legal fees. The documentary ends with Denise explaining that at the end of 2017, she was able to meet with Misty. So this was nice. This kind of ended things on a little bit of more of a positive note. She gets to hug and talk to the person that ultimately saved her life. So they talked for a while. It was very emotional. Denise told Misty that all she wanted was for someone to listen to them this entire time, and she was the one person who listened. Later on, Aaron and Denise got married. They stayed together and they got married. They have 2 children. They gave birth to a daughter, Olivia, in March 2020. And then a little while later, they had another daughter named Naomi. They relocated, started a new life. And this is where the documentary came to an end. This whole story eerily reminded me of a show that I watched several years ago on Netflix, starring Caitlin Dever. It's called Unbelievable. And if you've never seen it, you need to. This is also based on a true story. And when I watched Unbelievable and then heard about this, I thought that Unbelievable must be based on this quote-unquote Gone Girl case. But it's not. It's just an eerily similar case where yet another woman was victimized and accused when she literally was raped. So Unbelievable is based on a true story from which a young woman, Marie, was raped, and when she came forward to police, they didn't believe her. They smeared her in the media, and they threatened to press charges against her for lying to law enforcement. And it wasn't until the work of a female detective that police would catch on to a serial rapist named Mark Patrick O'Leary. And O'Leary would later plead guilty to 28 counts of rape and associated felonies in Colorado, as well as 2 in Washington state. O'Leary would be convicted in Marie's rape after police found photos on O'Leary's phone. And it's clear in Marie's case that she was coerced by police into admitting that she had lied about the rape. Marie would later sue the city of Linwood and settle for just shy of $150,000. And she lost her job. She was destroyed in the media. And she was extremely young. I think she was 19 years old when this happened to her. She left Washington and she later got married and had 2 children. This case reminds me so much of Denise Huskins. So yeah, it's called Unbelievable. It stars Caitlin Dever, incredible actress. That's who's going to play Abby in The Last of Us. And she was also in that Alien movie on Hulu, No One Will Save You. So if you guys watched that, that's her. So really, really, really good show. And I just wanted to close out by saying rape is the most underreported crime, with an estimated 63% of assaults being left untold to police. It's also estimated that only 12% of child sexual abuse cases are actually reported to police. Meanwhile, the prevalence of false reporting is only 2 to 10%. So to put this into perspective, About 62% of robberies are reported, and about 63% of assault and battery cases are reported. Rapes are vastly underreported. The way that police respond is an extremely big reason why, and I feel like this case is a perfect example. Sexual assault cases legally are also rarely prosecuted, and the actual conviction and incarceration for sexual assault cases are even more uncommon, which means the perpetrators of these crimes are often left out on the street. They become repeat offenders in a world with no consequence. As for the survivors, they're left with an increased risk for substance addiction, PTSD. They often have difficulty holding down jobs. They will deal with sexual health problems and reoccurring reproductive, gastrointestinal, and cardiovascular problems. My questions to ponder as we close out this American Nightmare coverage episode is, when will sexual assaults finally be taken seriously on the national level? When will victims not have to live in fear anymore of what will happen to them if they come forward? When will we have a victim first mentality, legally, through law enforcement, and as a nation, where victims can trust that their case is in proper hands? When will enough be enough? I hope that Denise and Aaron and the other victims of Matthew Mueller are living their best life. Matthew Mueller, you are a piece of shit. I hope you rot in hell. I hope that these families are at peace and they are safe and healthy. And Matt Mustard, David Sesma, you guys suck as well. That is my American Nightmare coverage. Another really hard story, hard topic, but very important to talk about. So thank you guys for requesting this. I always love when you request things. I hope you guys enjoyed this Patreon leak. If you did, be sure to let me know. If you're listening on Spotify, you can drop a comment down below. If you are watching on YouTube, you can also drop a comment there, like this video. And if you really enjoyed this documentary coverage and you want more, go check out patreon.com/Perplexity Mystery Podcast. There is tons of bonus content over there that you guys can go binge. Early and ad-free episodes, just $1 a month. And if you want that sweet bonus content, you just pay $3 a month. There's tons of perks and a community over there, and it helps support me and keep the show up and running. My patrons are the only reason I get to keep doing this podcast. So big thanks to all of my patrons, my members of my Perplexed Society. I love you all so much. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'm curious what y'all's theories are about the Mare Island Creeper, if there's any potential connections to the FBI, allegedly, because that's one of the big theories with this case. Do you guys think that this assailant acted alone? Do you think it was a group? I would love to hear your theories. Thank you guys so much for listening. You all are amazing. I hope you have a great week and stay safe, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Perplexity, a mystery podcast, hosted, written, and produced by Kadra Brannon. Assistant producer is TJ McCrae. If you enjoyed today's episode, tell the world about it by leaving a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It really is the best way to support. Have a topic request or a perplexing story of your own you'd like to share? Send an email to perplexitymysterypodcast@gmail.com. If you would like to support the show further and unlock exclusive bonus content, join the Perplexed Society at patreon.com/Perplexity Mystery Podcast. Perplexity merch and additional support links can be found in the episode description. Until next week, stay curious.